Hi, today we're going to talk about point slope form, which is the third form of writing linear equations that we've discussed so far this year. We've talked about standard form when the x and the y are on the left-hand side. We've talked about slope-intercept form when the equation just has the y by itself, like y equals mx plus b. And today we're going to take a look at point slope form. Our goal today is to be able to graph an equation written in point slope form. The homework assignment is Unit 1, Day 5, and the assignment is posted in Schoology. Please use Kami to complete the assignment. Take a moment to set up your Cornell notes for today and pause the video and resume when you're ready. All right, the first thing I'd like to discuss is just what is point slope form. It's our major topic for today. I mentioned this is the third type of linear equation, the third way that we can write equations. And when we're talking about point slope form, the reason why it's called that is because in the equation itself, we are given the slope of a line, which we've seen is the letter m, but we're also given two different coordinates, an x1 and the y sub 1. So those two coordinates together are one point that is on the line of this equation. In other words, it's one solution to the equation. So here's what the form of the equation looks like. So the way that we read this is we say it's y minus y sub 1 equals m times x minus x sub 1. Okay, again, m is the slope of the line. So that's that number that tells us if the line rises or falls. And then notice in the coordinates, in the ordered pair, the x comes before the y. So it's x sub 1 comma y sub 1. But in our form of an equation, the x sub 1 goes at the end of the equation. Notice also it's inside the parentheses. And x sub 1 is going to be a number. Okay, so it might be x minus 5 in the parentheses. It might be x minus negative 3 in the parentheses. It could even be something like x minus 0 in the parentheses. Okay, and we'll talk about how to simplify that and what that'll look like today. But just notice that x sub 1 could be a positive number, a negative number, or even 0. Let's go back to the beginning of the equation. Y sub 1 is just a number. It's the y coordinate of the point on the line. So when we write y minus y sub 1, again, that could be y minus 5, or it could be y minus negative 3, or even y minus 0. So y sub 1 could be a positive number, a negative number, or even 0. So the first thing what we're going to do is just let's practice writing an equation when it's written in point slope form. So in example number 1, we know that the slope of our line is 3, and we also are given the information that the point 5 comma negative 1 is a point on our line. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to label that, keeping in mind that when I have an ordered pair, I think of it as x sub 1 comma y sub 1. And then I already see that my value of slope, or m, is 3. Point slope form. Think of it as filling in 3 blanks. Remember, it's y minus y sub 1 equals m times x minus x sub 1. Okay, it's a formula. Hopefully you wrote that down in your notes. It's super important. If you did not do that earlier, please copy that down now or go back and pause the video to get that. All we have to do is do a little substitution. So the value of y sub 1, if we look over at our given information, the y coordinate is negative 1. So we're going to replace negative 1 in the place of y sub 1. M had a value of 3, so I'm just going to replace m with the number 3. And then finally, we had the x sub 1. In other words, the x coordinate from the ordered pair And we could see in our ordered pair the x-coordinate was 5 because it came first. It was the x. So we're just going to put a 5 in our last blank. Notice I didn't randomly place those numbers. I was very specific about where I put those. Okay, if m equals 3, I put 3 in for m. If my ordered pair starts with 5, that's my x-coordinate. I had to put that where x sub 1 is in my equation. And if my ordered pair has -1 as the y-coordinate, I have to put that in the place of y sub 1 in my equation. Now the last thing we need to do is simplify a little bit. In our equation, we end up having double signs, at least on the left-hand side. So we have to go back to our rules from like pre-algebra, probably going all the way back to like 7th or even 6th grade. If I am subtracting a negative number, that's the same as adding a positive number. It's kind of our chop rule, if any of your teachers did that. So instead of y minus -1, we can write that as y minus -1. So it actually makes it y plus 1. The slope was 3. I don't change that. And I check to see in the parentheses, x minus 5 doesn't have any double signs, so there's nothing to do there. So that is our equation written in point-slope form. One thing I want to point out, in our equation here, notice we have a plus sign, but the y-coordinate was a negative number. Okay, so those are a little bit different. The signs change. All right, let's look at number 2. Okay, very similar. This time in number 2, our slope is -1/2. And we're using the ordered pair -2, 0 on the graph. That's our x and y coordinate of a point on the line. So I'm going to label that x sub 1 and y sub 1. So again, all we're doing is filling in the blanks. Why don't I have you go ahead and pause the video and fill in those blanks on your own. When you're ready, resume and see how you did. All right, so checking. I sometimes like to fill it out with blanks first and then put the numbers in place. So if m is -1/2, I have to think about, well, where is m in my equation? And then remember, oh yeah, it's right after the equal sign. Then my x-coordinate, even though it's listed first in the ordered pair, right? -2 is listed first over here. I have to make sure that it's going by the x in the equation, which is going to be at the end of the equation in the parentheses. So I have to place a -2 at the end, x minus -2. Then my y-coordinate was 0, and I want to make sure that my y-coordinate goes after the y minus at the beginning of the equation. So I'm just going to put a 0 in there. So hopefully you got that, but now let's go ahead and simplify this equation. So a couple things we can actually do to simplify this. At the beginning of the equation, we had y minus 0. Well, we know one of our rules of math is anytime you subtract 0 or nothing from something, it's going to stay the same. So y minus 0, we can say is just y. -1/2 is just our slope, it's just a fraction, so we're going to leave that the same. Now, in the parentheses, we have double signs. Subtracting a negative, just like on the first example, is going to change to a positive or a plus sign here. So think of it as minus -2. That's what I always like to do. Take those two negative signs and put them together, it becomes a plus sign. So this is technically point slope form, even though it doesn't quite look right because the y is by itself. Notice again that when we have a plus sign as one of our inside the parentheses or part of the coordinates, it's because it was a negative number, a negative coordinate. All right, number 3. This time, we're going to work backwards. We are starting with the equation, and we are identifying the slope and a point that's on the line based on what the equation gives us. So we have y minus 8 equals 1/2 times x plus 1. That's our equation over here. So I always like to start with the slope because I feel like that's the easier one to point out. That's the number or the part right after the equal sign. So in this case, that's 1/2, right? My slope is always going to be right in that location. Now the ordered pair, remember it's x sub 1, y sub 1. So we're thinking, well, what numbers y minus blank equals blank times x minus blank would give me that equation on this problem? Well, I think I can tell that it's just going to be an 8 in that spot. I also know, I already knew that my slope was 1/2. We already listed that. The trick here is at the end. Inside the parentheses, it's not just a 1, because if I do that, it would read x minus 1. But in the parentheses, it reads x plus 1. So how in the world did it change to an addition? Well, hopefully you remember through my hints on the last two examples, the only way that happens is if we have a double sign here. So instead of x minus 1, we really want to think of it as x minus negative 1, because that's how these two signs together would change it to a plus. So with all that in mind, if we want to write down the ordered pair, or the point on the line based on this equation, the x coordinate goes first. But remember, to find the x coordinate, you have to look by the x in the equation. That's going to be negative 1. And then the y coordinate, the y sub 1, is going to be after the y minus, and in this case, it's just 8. So it's not negative 8. The y and the minus sign are part of our form. It's the number that comes after that. All right, let's try that one more time. I'm going to have you try this one. So I want you to copy down y equals 4/7 times x minus 9 in parentheses. And I'd like you to try to find the slope and then the two coordinates of the point that's on this line. You can go ahead and pause your video, and once you have your answers, resume to see how you did. All right, so if we were to start filling in our missing blanks here to kind of match up what we have to think about y minus what would just give us a y here. Well, I know that subtracting nothing is going to make that happen. So y minus 0 is the unsimplified form of just having a y. I also see the 4/7 here is that fraction after the equal sign. And now I have to think about what's in the parentheses. So we have x minus something that's going to make it x minus 9. And you might be tempted to say, oh, well, it's got to be negative 9 because I see the minus up here. But you have to keep in mind, if it's x minus negative 9, then it really would say x plus 9 in the parentheses. Okay, but it doesn't. So we know that that's not true. It's just x minus positive 9. So now, putting that together to identify the slope, we can see that the slope is 4/7. It's that number that comes after the equal sign. And then for your ordered pair, remember to put the x coordinate first and the y coordinate second. So my x coordinate here was, I'll have to look by the x, that's going to be 9 over here on the right hand side, just this number we plugged in. And then the y coordinate is a 0. The point 9, 0 is on this line, and it has a slope of 4/7. Rise of 4, run of 7. All right, last example is putting all this together to be able to graph. And this was our learning target. I can graph an equation of a line written in point slope form. So in order to graph this equation, y plus 4 equals 2/3 times x minus 2. We need to be able to identify those pieces of information that we just practiced identifying, and then I'll show you how to graph this. So pause the video, and I'd like you to find the slope of this line and identify the ordered pair from the equation. When you're ready, resume the video and see how you did. All right, hopefully by now, through the examples we've done, you recognize that the slope m is just going to be 2/3. And then remembering that your x coordinate comes from the end of the equation inside the parentheses after the x minus. Now in this case, it's just x minus positive 2, not negative 2. Okay, so the x coordinate is 2. But the y coordinate, the y sub 1, is not just 4. Because remember, point slope form says y minus blank. Well, if we just put a 4 in that blank, it would just say y minus 4, but it doesn't. It says y plus 4. So it kind of tells us we got to have that double negative there, making the y coordinate -4 instead of +4. All right, so that's just the identifying part. Now let's take a look at graphing. So the first step in graphing is plot the point. Okay, so we want to plot 2, -4 on the graph. Now that's not rise over run, it's not slope, it's just plotting points. So we always plot the x coordinate first, which is 2, and the y coordinate second, which is -4, and I'm just showing a visual here. We're going to the right 2 and down 4. That is the point 2, -4. From that point, just like we did with the y-intercept earlier in the week, where we started at the y-intercept and we used slope to plot more points, we're doing the same thing here. We know that this point, 2, -4, is on the line. Now we want to go ahead and use our rise over run to plot more points. So looking at my fraction, the rise is +2, the run is +3. And as we saw on Wednesday, we talked a lot about this in our whiteboard videos, or our whiteboard problems. Because it's a positive slope, I want my line to go up and to the right when I'm done drawing. So that gives me a little clue that when I rise 2, I want to make sure that I go up 2. And when I run 3, I want to make sure I'm going to the right 3 units. So I'm just going to count carefully, going up 2 and right 3, right 2 and up 3. And if I tried to do that again, I'd run out of space because I can't go to the right 3. I can always work backwards. It would be the same thing as going down 2 and back 3, because that's the exact opposite directions here. Down 2 and back to the left 3. So I could continue that to get a few more points on my line. Actually, quite a few more points. The last thing we need to do is draw the line to represent all of the solutions, even the ordered pairs that include decimals and fractions that would make that equation true. And that's the whole point of graphing that line, is to represent all of the possible ordered pairs that make that true. All right, so graphing, I just had one example because it's a lot like what we did with slope-intercept method. It's just that your starting point is different. It's not the y-intercept, it's just some point on the line, and that point comes from these numbers in the equation. All right, that's it for examples today. There is an effort assignment. Make sure to read the directions carefully because in each pair of problems, you are doing a different step, a different skill. You can complete this using Kami, and don't forget to turn it in when you are finished. Let me know if you have any questions. You can email me, and I will certainly try to answer by email, or we can set up a Google Meet.